Welcome to the Plain Faith Podcast, Episode 9.
It was just an amazing moment. He looked at us and he said, I'm not a good man. I'm a bad man. I don't deserve this. But God sent you guys here to save my wife and my babies. And I tell you, that was a powerful moment for my wife and I to share Christ with this young family.
The Plain Faith Podcast is a podcast about missionary aviation and the stories of missionary aviators who have taken seriously Jesus' command to go and make disciples of all nations and are using airplanes to be His witnesses at the ends of the earth. Thank you for joining us for this episode. Your host for today's show will be Jimmy Tidmore, who, in addition to hosting this podcast, is a pastor and a pilot, residing with his family in what is known as the Rocket City, Huntsville, Alabama. He is very interested in promoting missionary aviation and helping prospective missionary pilots reach the mission field. And now, with these introductions out of the way, let's get started on another great episode of the Plain Faith Podcast.
Welcome back to the Plain Faith Podcast. It sure is good to be back. I'm sorry there has been such a long delay between episodes. That was not my intention. It just sort of happened. But I'm back today with another great episode that I am sure you will all enjoy. On today's show, we are going to hear from the president and co-founder of Samaritan Aviation, Mark Palm. Mark is not just the co-founder and president of Samaritan Aviation, though. He also serves with Samaritan along the Sepik River in Papua New Guinea as a pilot. In fact, the Sepik River is a 700-mile runway for Samaritan's Cessna 206 floatplanes. But before we get into today's episode, let me read another review we received a while back in iTunes. It is from someone named Matthew who gives the show 5 stars and says, "Incredible insight. I just listened to the latest podcast, episode 7, and I will for sure be going back to listen to all the others. Jimmy, you are offering clarity to what it looks like to serve God through mission aviation in a very honest way. I think all kinds of people will be interested in these interviews, but anyone considering the path of mission aviation will want to hear every word of these." And again, he signs his name, Matthew. Well, Matthew, thanks for those kind words. I'm glad you are enjoying the show. I'm so thankful it is giving folks like you a glimpse into what it really looks like to serve as a missionary pilot. Now, I'd love to read your review on the show as well. So if you're enjoying these episodes, please take some time to leave us a review in iTunes. I'm doing my best to get to all of them on the show at some point. Well, enough of my blabbing. That's not what you were here for. Let's turn our attention now to Mark Palm with Samaritan Aviation. Well, Mark, I've been watching you and Samaritan Aviation from a distance now through the various social media platforms you are on, and I first began talking with folks in your organization about having you on the show way back several months ago, and I'm very excited to have the opportunity to finally speak with you today to hear about your story personally and about the story of the missions organization you founded, Samaritan Aviation. So, Mark, thank you so much for being on the show today, and let me just welcome you now to the Plain Faith Podcast.
Yeah, thank you, Jimmy. It's great to be with you this morning.
All right. Well, why don't we just begin by letting you tell us a little bit about yourself? For example, where are you from, and where did you grow up, and so forth?
Yeah, I know I have an interesting story. I kind of grew up in a lot of places. My dad was a minister, and so as a young child, I'm one of 5 boys in my family. We moved around. My dad started churches in California and Arizona and pastored in Michigan and then back to California. So I basically grew up kind of moving around. I think we averaged moving about once a year my whole life growing up. So kind of the place I ended up landing as a 13-year-old was Santa Cruz, California, and that's really where I consider home and where I really foundationally a lot of things that formed who I am and decisions I made came from my time in Santa Cruz. So that's kind of a short story. Yeah, my dad was a minister. He ran a homeless mission in Santa Cruz, which really had a big impact on my life as well, as I was was able to not only see ministry or see people talk about Jesus, but also see people physically, tangibly doing something for others in the name of Jesus. And I think that whole idea of being the hands and feet of Jesus as a young man, seeing that and being able to participate in that in Santa Cruz in a homeless mission is really where a lot of the passion I have for others physically, which has shaped Samaritan Aviation as well, came from. And, going back even farther than that, I accepted Christ when I was 10 years old. For me, it was kind of a crossroads. I had two brothers that were kind of going off and doing rebellious and getting into running away. I did some just getting into drugs and alcohol and some other things at a young age. And my father's a minister, and I kind of had a crossroads there as a 10-year-old, which way I was going to go. And, we had a revival meeting. I know we don't do revivals. It doesn't seem like anyway the way we used to when I was a kid, at least in the church we were in. And so we had a revival meeting, and, the old-fashioned altar call. And, I'll never forget the night I just decided I was going to follow Jesus. And I went forward and gave my life. And that was the beginning of a huge change in my focus and my just direction of who I was going to be.
All right. Well, very good. Well, from there, why don't you tell me about where aviation came onto the scene in your life, and was your call to missions? Did your call to missions precede that? Did they come together? How did all that work out to get you where you are now?
Yeah, aviation for me has been part of my life since I was just a young infant. Really, I mean, my grandfather was a World War II pilot, and so I heard all those stories. One of my uncles actually died in a plane crash flying. He was a pilot. One of my uncles was a pilot as well. So my cousin's a fighter pilot and been a military Air Force and Marine pilot for many years. So I was always, from a young age, planning on being either commercial or military pilot. So that was kind of the place I felt like I was going. And so then the missions call actually came after that.
All right. So in about what age did you start wrestling with a call to missions?
Yeah. So for me, it was actually a specific moment in time. It was an amazing experience. My dad ran a homeless mission. I attended another church in Santa Cruz for my youth group and activities with the other teenagers, and so we had a chance to go down and build houses in Mexico when I was 16. Mm-hmm. And so going down, taking the bus down from Santa Cruz, and it's about an 9-hour drive down to the border, and then going across into Mexico and building a house for a family that didn't have anything was an amazing experience. It was an eye-opener for seeing a different culture for the first time, seeing what people in other parts of the world experience as normal life for them versus what I had always seen here in America. And then having that opportunity to make a tangible difference in someone's life, I mean, through a house, place for them to live and their families. And it was during that time we had some devotional times every morning. And there was this one morning I was sitting on an old abandoned well and just reading the Bible, Psalm 139, doing some prayer time. And it was just a moment where God spoke to me, and it was as clear as if he was sitting right next to me. And he said this, he said, "I want you to use your passion for people and aviation to share my love in a remote part of the world." And that message was just like someone like you and I are talking right now. And so it wasn't like I wrestled with it. There was no wrestling. It was just the statement, and it was okay, that's where we're going. And from that moment on, my life changed. My focus changed. As I looked at preparing for aviation, all of a sudden it had missions was as much a part of it as anything. And so that happened as a 16-year-old in Mexico, and it completely changed my life.
All right, very good. I tell you what, that is nice when you get a call that is that clear and that quick. Lots of us wrestle for a long time with things, so from that perspective, you're fortunate. Let me ask you a little bit about your family now and what Tell me a little bit about your wife and how about her own call to the mission field and how all that came together and how you met and about your kids and so forth.
Yeah, my family, I'm blessed. We'll be celebrating 20 years of marriage here in a couple months.
Congrats.
And thanks. We've got 3 kids. My wife's Kirsten. We've got a Sierra. My daughter's 15. My son Drake is 13. And my other son Nolan is 11. And just really feel blessed with them. But I came down to San Diego actually to go to aircraft mechanics school back in 1996. And that 96, 97 year of school. And it was during that time I met my wife. She was attending Point Loma University. And I met her there. And it was an interesting. She'd done missions trips and really had just kind of surrendered herself to God. So it wasn't. She didn't have a specific call to a certain place or whatever, but she had surrendered her God to say wherever you want me to go. And so when I met her, even the first date we went on, I basically told her, I said, look, at this point, we'll get there as far as how the whole Samaritan Aviation came about.
Right.
But, a big part, I already knew by the time I met her that Papua New Guinea was where I was called to go. And so I just let her know, hey, I'm just letting you know I'm called to be a missionary bush pilot in Papua New Guinea. And if that's something you're okay with and you're okay with that possibility then I'm okay to continue to date. And if that's something that you're just not feeling like is something you're willing to be a part of, then we should just be friends. And so I was pretty wide, right out there in the open with it on the first date. And, she said, I'm surrendered to whatever God wants for my life. And she'd been on missions trips to Portugal and Mexico and so she had seen the world and had seen just had a passion to share God's love as well. So, so that's kind of how it worked with us. And then a couple years later, we were married, and she's been there from the beginning, and it's been the rock really, and it's just been a major part of everything we've done at Samaritan Aviation.
All right, very good. I appreciate that background information on you and your family. Let me ask you this at this particular juncture. Do you have any advice, though, for someone who might not have gotten that very direct proclamation from God that they are to go to the mission field, maybe wrestling with a call to missions right now? Is there anything that you could say to them as they are working through that?
Yeah, I think, like you said, I was a fortunate one to get a very clear call at a young age. I think, as other staff families have joined our Samaritan, and I've talked to them about their stories, it's one of those things. I think you number one, you've got to surrender everything if you're going to make it to the mission field. And it doesn't mean you're going to go to the mission field, but I think it's in all of our lives. If we're really going to follow God's will for our lives and find what that is, we have to just surrender and be willing to do whatever. And if I think God leads us through our passions as well, and I think finding a mentor is essential, and we can talk about that more later too. But I think that's where getting some help. If you're wrestling with it and you don't know for sure, I think that's where wisdom from a pastor, from someone who's already been there. I think you can also investigate. Go on a trip. I always tell people, it's like I've had people tell me, they want to do missionary flying and they've never even flown in an airplane. And I'm like, well, first thing you need to do is go down and pay an instructor, $100, whatever it costs to go fly for an hour and just see if you even like flying, number one. Yeah. Whether you get sick or whatever. There's certain ways that you can find out pretty fast sometimes. People have these goals and dreams or whatever, but they don't take the first step. And I think finding ways to take that first step, go flying, go figure out. In our organization, it's way more than flying. It's a passion for people, number one. Flying is down the list. It's a passion for God. It's a passion for people, and then it's aviation, really. to succeed in our organization, because you're hands-on. You're with the people. You're not just flying. You're not just flying a circuit. You're not flying a route with us. We are hands-on with the people. You're working in the hospital. You're in the village. So you really have to have a passion to share God's love, number one, and really a passion for the people you're going to serve, wherever that is. And I think it starts with there. And I'd also encourage people to get involved in your local church and start serving and find out if it's a good fit. I mean, but I think the mentorship, finding a pastor, finding a couple that's already been to the mission field, I think to me it's more than flying. It's that missionary first, and that's really the culture of Samaritan. Is you're a missionary and then you're a pilot. You're not a pilot that happens to be a missionary, and that can be different in different organizations. But for Samaritan, that's kind of the number one thing. There's a lot of pilots that won't fit in our organization because of that, because it's not about the flying, it's about the mission.
Yeah, so missionary first, pilot second.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that if you can get your life in that order, and then surround yourself with people that can speak into you, I think God will show you very clearly.
All right. Well, that was a very good answer. I really appreciate it. So you've told me about how your passion for aviation sort of developed from your family, your uncles and your cousins, and you sort of knew from a young age that you were going to be a pilot of some sort. But why don't you go on now and tell us about, when did you start taking lessons? When did you begin working on your actual flight training, and how did that play out and so forth?
Yeah, so I'll go back a little bit too. When I was 19, I just again, it's kind of a funny story, but I met a guy, a buddy of mine, Gary Buston, at college and at Bible school back in Florida as an 18, 19-year-old my freshman year. And during that time, we had decided to go to Papua New Guinea. He had been born there, a missionary kid, and so I'll go into that more later. But we actually went to New Guinea, and then literally 2 weeks after I got back from Papua New Guinea as a 19-year-old, that's when I started aviation. And I just started. I didn't go to a Moody. I didn't go to a well-known mission school. I just went to the local Watsonville Airport there in Santa Cruz, and I started flying and working. I was really trying to avoid debt. That's something we can talk about later too. The burden of what that does to a mission aviator. But I started flying as I could, and then after I probably got 20 hours of flying, I soloed, and I ran out of money. Then I ended up going to San Diego for for my aircraft mechanic training, and that was another thing. I went to a junior college because it was cheap, for the mechanic side, and so it was there I started the same thing. I was working at a restaurant trying to pay my way through school, and so I started flying again there and finished up my private license there in San Diego, and then finished up my A&P school. I was finishing A&P school. I started on my instrument rating. I had a guy that was amazing instructor who basically did it for free because he knew what my passion was. And so he instructed for free. By the time I finished my instrument, I had finished my A&P, and I had a friend who owned an airplane, so I was doing all the maintenance on his plane, so then I was able to fly for the cost of fuel. And so I just filled the plane up. The instructor was free, and then I also had another person, one of my family members, my cousin, who had started to support me to try to help me get through my instrument training. So anyway, it was a long process, though. That's the other thing. I started flying when I was 19. It was at least a year and a half before I finished my private license, and it was another 2 to 3 years before I got my instrument rating. And then another couple of years, I ended up going up to Santa Monica. My wife's a teacher. She ended up getting pregnant. We found out we were back in Papua New Guinea, and so back up to Santa Monica, living there, and I was working at the Santa Monica Airport as an aircraft mechanic to get my experience, and then I finished my commercial license there, and that's really the only time I ever got into debt. Really, I did take out a loan to finish my commercial training, and then I did my float training in Alaska. So anyway, kind of all of this over 7 or 8 years. That was a long process.
Yeah, that's something that continues to come out in these interviews, is that it's a long road, and you have to stay committed to where you're headed, or you're going to get discouraged along the way, because it's not, you don't just wake up one day and say, I'm going to be a missionary pilot, and it happens within the next year. I mean, this is years, maybe even a decade of working towards it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, having served now on the mission field, how long have you been flying in Papua New Guinea?
Yeah, we started Samaritan in around 2000 as official 501c3, and it's an amazing story. We've started with a prayer card of a picture of myself and my wife, my friend Gary and his wife, in front of someone else's airplane, and we had a nice logo made, and we came up with the name of the organization, and then we sent that out to 330 people, and shared a little paragraph of the vision that we had of our 5-year plan to get to Papua New Guinea, and it actually took 10 years to get over there from that. So I started flying in Papua New Guinea in February 2010. So it's been around a little over 7.5 years flying in Papua New Guinea.
Okay, so having flown there for 7.5, coming up on 8 years, do you have any advice for someone who is currently in flight training, whether it be at a place like Moody or some other school like that, or whether they're doing it the traditional FBO Part 61 route? Do you have some advice for those individuals who are working toward that in-flight training now, some things they should pay particular attention to, or areas they should focus in on, and so forth?
Yeah, I mean, the challenge is time, right? All of our organizations, we require 500 hours. Mm-hmm. Most of us require that amount of time. So, you're trying to get the 500 hours, but if you're getting that in a 172 in the right seat instructing,
right,
you really don't know a whole lot, to be honest, when it comes to bush flying or the real flying that we do. I shouldn't say real flying, but just the challenging flying that we do on a regular basis. You're not ready for it. And so I've always tell people, and I have candidates that are in our process now, and it's like, well, we're flying 206 aircraft, so you need to find time in a 206 airplane if you can. Even though we're on floats, and that's a whole other side of it, the plane flies very similar once you're off the ground, or off the water. Mm-hmm. And so having that time of a high performance, we're a complex as well because we have the gear on our float. But yeah, so those things I always tell people, like, try to find ways. There's organizations that'll let you come down and serve with them, or there's different programs where you can go to check it out, go do some flights. And I mean, there's one of the things that I've talked to many people that they get over there and they just it's too much. To be honest, the weather's too much, the strips are too hard. Try to figure that out before. It's a very challenging environment that we operate airplanes in, and it is very dangerous. And so it's one of those things that you just really try to get yourself out, get some real experience, even if it's just going over and serving in a parts bin somewhere. If you can go over, especially before you have kids, and all of us, once you have kids and a family, it's a challenge, obviously, to break away for a couple months and to do that. So my advice is, man, get over while you're young. If you know this is the kind of where God's leading you, and you don't have anything tying you down, like, go over somewhere and just serve fuel airplanes for one of these organizations for 3 or 4 months. Do an internship in the parts room. See what it takes. Go on some flights, some real flights if you can. And just know before you go and spend 8 years getting over there that you can actually, this is something that is for you, and that you've got the right I don't know if the right personality is it's not the right word, but just the right mental joy and passion. Because sometimes you'll get over and you'll realize, man, I don't even like this. I don't like this weather. I don't want to fight weather in the mountains. That's not what I signed up for. And just the pressure of flying people and knowing that your decision making is affecting could cost lives. I mean, those are things that they're just real challenges that people sometimes find out after they've already done all that work and effort, and then they realize it's not a good fit for them. And then that's, to me, I'd just encourage people to try to find that out before.
Yeah, so just because you enjoy flying doesn't mean you'll enjoy the type of flying that you folks are doing there in Papua New Guinea and other places around the world.
Absolutely.
And so I think what I heard you say is don't just focus on building hours to meet that 500-hour mark, but focus on building the right kind of hours, the right kind of time, and the right sorts of planes, and maybe even flying in some of the right sorts of places, whether that's doing some type of mountain course or maybe something like that. And if you have an opportunity, go to the mission field and see what this flying is really like, and see if you really are cut out to land in some of these crazy places and deal with this crazy weather without all the resources that we have here in the States.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's also the cultural aspect. I mean, for us, obviously, I knew where I was going, and I fell in love with the Papua New Guinean people, and when I went there as a 19-year-old. So it wasn't a question for me, but I've brought over pilots. We always require everybody to come over for a couple of weeks, and because we want to see how they react in the culture and see what it's like when they're jet lagged and tired and hot and sweaty and things are not happening like they do here in America. How do they respond? How do they treat the people? You learn a lot about yourself through trips like that, and so get out there and try to experience some of that before you spend 8 years. That's my advice.
Very good. And that kind of leads us into the next segment, which is talking about the mission field itself, where you're at and what it's like. And even, sometimes it's helpful to hear how it is different from what we are used to here in the States and so forth. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the place you're serving and what the culture is like and what the people are like and the weather and so forth.
Yeah, so, we work in Papua New Guinea. We're on the north coast in the Sepik province. We operate on a 700-mile river called the Sepik River. And, Papua New Guinea, there's 8 million people in Papua New Guinea. It's actually the second, New Guinea is the second largest island in the world. Mm-hmm. And it also has, over 800 languages. And so the interesting thing about Papua New Guinea is the fifth of the world languages have come from Papua New Guinea. And when you have these different languages, you also have these little subcultures. So Papua New Guinea is very different. You have the kind of the coastal areas, island areas, and then you have the mountain areas. And right through the middle of the island, you have 14,000-foot mountains and 10,000. I mean, it's just this massive mountain range that kind of separates the north from the south on the island, because it's kind of facing that way, and it's just above Australia. And so you have a lot of mixtures of people, of cultures, of customs. You can actually see people physically; they look different if they're from the highlands versus the coastal areas. It's a very interesting culture. For example, if you're working in the mountain areas, it's nice. It's 5,000-6,000 feet, and it's cool weather. And you work on the coast, and it's tropical, hot, sweaty, humid, Florida in the summertime type of an environment. So certain people I've met over there work really well in the mountains, can't stand the coast, and other people like myself love the coast and the heat and don't really like going to the mountains. Mm-hmm. So there is a huge difference in just in weather and all of that in Papua New Guinea. And you talk about different from, how is it different from America? I mean, you've got this culture that it's a shame-based culture. It's a different type of just how their worldview is coming from a completely different spot. It's very tribal culture. So the expectations that we have are very different than the expectations they would have in the same situations. So there's a lot of learning to do when you first get there. For me, I went there as a 19-year-old, and it was one of those things where we went around the island, and for a couple of weeks we just lived on an island with the people, and just no agenda really, but just to be with the people, see what it was like, see what their challenges were. And it was very clear for us that there was two main things. There was a spiritual component, where there was a lot of places where a priest had just blessed an island, for example, or there just wasn't a clear understanding. And it's an animistic culture, worshiping nature, ancestral, and spirits. And so coming from that and then trying to mix Christianity, there's been a lot of mixture of the two. And so seeing the need spiritually for spiritual discipleship, and then also seeing the need medically, just the lack of access. To give you an example, where we operate, there's one hospital for 500,000 people, and 220,000 of those people live along this large river, and the only hospital is on the coast, right where we live in Wewak, and all these people live along this river with no access in an emergency. So, at the upper part, it's 2 to 3 to 4 days away just to get down to the hospital. At the lower part, it's 1 to 2 days. And so there's really no hope for most of them. If you have a snake bite, poisonous snake bite, if you have a trauma wound, there's lots of tribal fighting. So if someone chops your arm off, or you get speared, or you have pregnancy issues, about 40% of what we do is pregnancy emergencies as far as that goes, and breech births and retained placentas, and all of these issues and physical things, the sicknesses that come up, falling out of trees, getting coconuts down or whatever, and no hope to get to the only hospital. And so you have this remoteness and this lack of access, and what goes along with that is lack of education. So a lot of the people are not educated past 4th grade, 5th grade, and so you have just a lot of things where in the States we expect everybody to go to school, and most people graduate from high school at least, and so there's a whole side of that's different. They have this thing over there called the Wantok system, and it's a community. Wantok is your friend or family, and so you're expected, if you're successful, to share everything with your family members, and so that folds into every part of the community. If you have a job and no one else does a job, you're responsible to send the kids to school, and you're responsible to keep everybody going in town. And then out in the village, it's all subsistence living, and you're basically catching fish in the morning to feed yourself. There's no electricity, there's no water, mostly dirty water to drink, and there's all of those things, and community health challenges, and they cut their canoes out with an axe, and I mean it's like stepping back in time in a lot of these areas that we work in, and that's just all they know, and so you're coming from America and you're coming into that culture, and it's a big, huge shock for most people when they see that for the first time.
Right. Now, I imagine there are large parts of Papua New Guinea that are like this. What is it that led you specifically to the part of the country that you were in?
When we first we went back in 2000 on another trip after we had started Samaritan, and we went around to different places, and we kept hearing about the vision had always been from the beginning to bring a seaplane. There was no seaplanes in New Guinea. There hadn't been a seaplane in New Guinea since the 70s. The MAF had a seaplane there in the 70s, and they'd had an incident with the plane in the river, and that was it. They hadn't been a seaplane since. in the entire country. And so we felt like the seaplane, there's so much water there, we felt like it would be the answer to a lot of these issues. And so we kept going to different parts of the country that were the remote areas with water. And we kept hearing about the Sepik. You got to go to the Sepik province. There's lots of water. There's a huge need. The one hospital's on the coast. There's no access for the people to get to the hospital. 700-mile river. And so that, over and over, we kept hearing about the desperate need of the Sepik province. And so that's what drew us over there. We went in 2001 for the first time to Wewak, and we drove a car out to the river. It took most of a day to get out there, and then we got on a canoe, and we went up the river a few hours to visit a little village. And it was very obvious, looking at that area, that a float plane could revolutionize how healthcare was brought to those people. And so that's really where the what drew us to Wewak, and that's where we've been serving ever since.
All right. Well, why don't you talk a little bit now about Samaritan Aviation? We've talked a bit about it, but why don't you tell us how it came into existence and who was participating in that process from the beginning, and just give us some insight into the background of the organization.
Yeah. So my buddy and I, Gary, went over in 1994, and we saw the need. And I was 19, he was 21. We came back, and in 2000 we launched Samaritan as a 501c3. And basically we came back, and both of us went to college. I went to aircraft mechanics school, went to pilot training, and basically just working to get over to Papua New Guinea and to share God's love. And the original vision was always was basically to be the hands and feet of Jesus. How can we go over? Bring people in when they have emergencies, bring medical supplies out, bring pastors out, educators, train in the villages, and bring up leaders, and we feel like we can, the whole idea was the plane could be used as a tool to be missionaries. And so that was really the whole base of who Samaritan Aviation has always been, as missionaries first, pilots second, and how this airplane can be used as a tool to share Christ. And in this area, nobody else was doing it in the same way. There was no other float planes there. We also felt like we didn't want to charge for the flights, and so we wanted to offer a free service to the people that couldn't afford it, as they had no other way in. And so that was kind of the original vision. We came back. The first thing we did was we founded a board of advisors. We got our nonprofit status, and then we just, like I said earlier, we sent out this prayer card to 330 people with a picture of us on the front, someone else's airplane, and just said, "This is our goal." And that was the beginning of a long journey. I think we got a couple attaboys. Go get them. Good luck. I think we raised about $330 out of this 330 mail out. We expected this mass amount of money to come in, and but we were still young and so passionate that it didn't faze us, and we just kept talking and telling the story, and we slowly grew. We actually had a hangar and an office in 2002 that we got in Montrose, Colorado, but we didn't even have an airplane. So we had a hangar, we had a great logo, the same logo that's on the tail of our airplanes today, and nice business cards. We had no airplanes, and people would always ask us, "Oh, what kind of planes do you guys fly?" And it was always a very embarrassing moment where we had to explain that we had an hangar and an office, but with no airplanes. And so we had formed, through our travels, we had formed a relationship with Wings of Hope in St. Louis, and they ended up selling us an airplane for $15,000, and it was a 182. Mm-hmm. And so that was our first airplane, and we started flying down to Mexico to get that international flight experience, to do missions. We wanted to do missions now, but we knew Papua New Guinea was a few years away based on funding and needing the airplanes and all of that. So we started flying to Mexico and bringing volunteers down. We'd have up to 12 airplanes, private aircraft, flying down to this little remote dirt strip down in Baja and serving medically with the migrant farm workers there. And so we worked with the missionaries down there, and every 2 months we'd do a flight down. So we did that for a few years, and all the while the ultimate goal was Papua New Guinea, and we would go to Papua New Guinea every couple of years. We'd continue developing relationships, continue to refine the goal, the vision, and so we did that for many years. In 2006-07, we finally actually were able to purchase a float plane. We bought this old worn out 206 from Hawaii, and for $110,000. That needed a lot of work, and we spent the next year and a half working with Wings of Hope, and myself, and I would fly back to St. Louis, and we would work on this plane and raise money, and then work on the plane, and this went on. And around 2008, we finally finished the airplane, and we did a bit of a national tour with the airplane, and went to Oshkosh and Air Show, and stopped around 56 different spots between 2008 and 2009, just sharing the story, trying to bring awareness to who we were, because nobody, a big challenge with any organization is nobody knows who you are. When you start an organization, and then most people don't know where Papua New Guinea is. So we were kind of at two issues there that we had to overcome. Number one, we had to educate people on Papua New Guinea and why it was important for them to care about some people that were 10,000 miles away. And then the other things, we had to tell people about who we are, and we're a young aviation organization. Number three, we'd never been there to do this work, and no one else had done what we were trying to do, which is offer a seaplane service in a river that's 700 miles long, that rises and falls up to 20 feet in 3 days. We can talk about more the dangers of working there, but a lot of junk in the river, lots of flooding. Trying to do this in an area, some people said it couldn't be done. Some people that had been in New Guinea for many years, aviation people, and so we were kind of overcoming a lot of different things there. But the passion never stopped, and we just kept telling the story. We kept praying, and God just kept slowly, building it up. And we were trying to be there in 2005, and it took till 2010. But looking back, it was just God's hand on our own lives, getting us ready to be effective over there, and getting the base of people to support us, to make sure it sustained itself. Anyway, building those government relationships, and so. I could go on and on about the many miracles that kept happening, but it was just amazing to see it. Just every year we get a little closer, and finally in 2010 January, my family and I moved over to launch the flight operations over there, and I can tell you what a moment that was, to fly into Wewak for the first time with the airplane. I ended up packing it in the container, shipping it to Port Moresby. Putting it together. Port Moresby is about 500 miles from Wewak. It's the capital of Papua New Guinea. And then flying it over the mountains and then into Wewak with Gary and with our aviation advisor, Bruce Johnson. And, just an amazing moment to actually show up and finally get there after, the call coming in 1994 with Samaritan, and the vision in 1994, and it took us till 2010 to actually get an airplane in Papua New Guinea. And I can tell you, the first emergency flight that we ever flew out onto, I remember this. I'll never forget it. I was Bruce Johnson and I were getting the plane ready. We get this call to go out to this remote village on the Sepik River, and it's bad weather. It's raining and low clouds and everything. And I'll never forget rushing around trying to get the stretcher in the plane and all of those things. And we flew out and picked up this pregnant mom who was unconscious, and brought her back into Wewak. It was only a 30-minute flight, and got her in, rushed her in for emergency surgery, and go back the next day to the hospital and see this lady. Antonio's her name, and to see this newborn baby, sitting there with her, just amazing moment to see these 2 lives that have been saved by the airplane, and all of those years of telling people, I mean, 10 years we're going around America, we can do this. This is what we're going to do, and half the people believed us, some people didn't, but to just go, wow, God, you helped us to do this. We saved 2 lives right here, and just an amazing moment for me personally. And the family named the baby after me, and
Wow.
it's, to have a little baby named after you is a big honor.
Mm-hmm.
And just a few months ago, I was able to go visit Mark in his village. He just turned 7 years old. Visit with his mom and dad and his sister, and just a reminder of God's faithfulness and what we've been able to do over there.
Yeah. So at 19 years old in 1994, all the way to 2010, 16 years later. That's a long ride, man. That's a long ride. So I commend you, and I also couldn't help but thinking how helpful or how fortunate it was that you were 19 and kind of naive about the challenges in front of you, because I mean this is an enormous thing that you have pulled off, and it sounds like we're about the same age. I'm 41, and it sounds ludicrous for me to think about a 19-year-old having this vision and pulling it off, and you did it. So congratulations. It's a great story, not only of your commitment and your faithfulness, but also obviously, and you would admit this, I'm sure, of God's faithfulness in His work, because it's too big of an undertaking to have you just have accomplished it, you and your buddy.
Well, no, absolutely. I mean, I think that it's a total testament of God's faithfulness, and also it's I hope it's a faith builder to other people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When God gives you a dream or a vision, to follow it, and just because it doesn't happen overnight doesn't mean it wasn't from God.
Yeah.
It's easy to get discouraged, and we were too young, and I know you used the word naive, which is a polite word to say. I think that is true. It never dawned on us that it wouldn't work. I think that was that was the part that other people missed maybe. And I think also one of the things I have a lot of people come up to me and they want advice because they want to start an organization. And the first thing I say is anybody else doing what you want to do? Because if there is, you need to join them.
Mm-hmm.
Don't start an organization if you don't have to, because it is way harder than you've ever dreamed, and it'll take everything you've got and more to make it happen. And there's no reason to duplicate what other people are doing. And I see that in New Guinea, and it's very frustrating when you have 2 people trying to do the same thing, but not working together to do it. And it's so important that you've number 1, find out what's going on where you feel called to go, and number 2, find out if someone else is already doing what you have a passion for, because joining them, you can make them twice as strong. But if you try to go and do your own thing, you're really going to actually make it weaker and maybe take resources away from people that are already doing it.
So why don't we continue on by giving you an opportunity now to tell us about, you've mentioned it a little bit, but tell us about the types of planes that Samaritan uses, and the types of flying that you do there, and the types of missions that you send your pilots out on and so forth.
Yeah, so we've got 2 Cessna 206, we've got a 1980 and a 1981. And so that we use Aeroset floats. They're the new fiberglass floats by far. I've used Edos and I've used others, but the Aeroset floats are amazing on the 206 airplane, especially with the amphibs. I think that's where the biggest difference comes in is the amphibian takeoff and performance is much better. But so that's what we work on. You basically fly off of a hard strip in Wewak. There's a paved strip there. It's about 4,800 feet long, and so we're based in a hangar. And then everywhere we fly is all water. So once we leave Wewak, there's a 700-mile river. We have over 70 different locations that we land in. So we're covering a very large area from the top to the bottom of this river. Wewak is located kind of toward the lower middle part of the river. So our average flight, it's about 40 miles the closest part of the river. And then our upper reach is about 128 miles. And then our lower Sepik River area is around 60 miles. So our average flight's around 40 minutes, 45 minutes. And we work in an area, there's mountains right next. So we live on the coast. And then there's a ridge line of mountains. It's around 2,500 feet, 2,000 feet. And then if you go west, that goes up to 5,000 feet plus. And if you go to the east, it actually goes down and actually becomes, the river actually cuts through there. So lots of mountains right away, but not super tall mountains. And then it drops back down on the other side of those mountains, and it's all almost sea level. I mean, the top of the river is only 300 feet elevation, which is why it's a very slow-moving, very large river. And then we also operate in a lot of different lakes and smaller rivers that feed into the Sepik area. And so it's a lot of we're dealing with a lot of weather, lots of for us a lot of pilots, once they land, the job's done. For us, once you land, the job's beginning in a lot of ways. And so there's a lot of things on the river that you have to deal with for landing, docking, and taking off.
So you've mentioned that one memorable flight in particular about getting that mother to the hospital so that her life and her baby's life could be saved. So obviously you do that type of flying. What other types of flights do you take?
Yeah, so our main focus is emergency life flights. About 60% of all of our flights would fall into that category. We also do medicine delivery. Mm-hmm. We've delivered 128,000 pounds of medical supplies to these remote aid posts. We work with about 38 different aid posts and health centers that are along the river. We also work with 10 other NGOs that are over there. A lot of these clinics happen to be church-run, actually. Catholic Health has about 22 clinics, and there's several evangelical Pacific Island ministries and some other groups that have clinics as well. And so we work with all of those to bring staff in and out, to bring the medicines in. We also fly and to do vaccinations. We have medical staff on our medical personnel on our staff now, and so we'll go out and do inoculate a whole village with vaccines. We do disaster relief. We've helped stop cholera outbreaks, whooping cough outbreaks, malaria, measles. So we're quick responders whenever there's any type of a health crisis in this whole area. And to give you an example, in 2009, the year before we came, they had a cholera outbreak there, and 3,000 people died just from a cholera outbreak. And so, being able to go in, we had one outbreak that came up like this, and we were able to go in with personnel medicine. In 3 days, they had 93 cases, but because we were able to respond quickly, only 3 people lost their lives. And so being able to go in quickly if there's a flood, the last couple of years we've had some of the biggest floods in the Sepik River in the last 100 years, and we've had some of the biggest droughts. It's amazing the different the water levels that have gone up and down. And so being able to go in and help people in need to do drought assessments, flood assessments, bringing in those medical supplies. We also do some search and rescue on the ocean there when boats go missing. So there's some of that flying as well. Mm-hmm. And then there's the community health evangelism part where we're going in and flying in pastors to do leadership and discipleship training with the leaders of the villages. And so that's another part of what we do.
Okay, so lots of medical related flying and even all the way to flying pastors and teachers in and out so that the church in that country can be built up.
Yeah, that's correct. And another thing we do that I think is a big part of our ministry side is, one thing about Papua New Guinea is when you bring a patient to the hospital hospital doesn't take care of the patient physically. They'll administer medication, but it's another villager's responsibility to feed the patient, to bathe the patient, and to take care and look out for the patient. So if you can imagine, you lived in this remote village, along the side of this muddy river. You've never seen the ocean. You've never seen electricity, vehicles, and you get picked up by this plane that lands on the river, and taxis right up to your village, to your little grass hut there, loads you in, or your family member, and flies you straight into Wewak, and now you're seeing the ocean, you're seeing a vehicle, you're seeing electricity. I mean, the things that must go through the minds. I try to put myself in their shoes, and I can't even wrap my head around what it would be like to go from living in a hut, never really going anywhere, to now seeing civilization, people, with cell phones and all the rest of the stuff. And so, we have a team that goes in every day. We have Papua New Guinean staff as well, and they're going in every day, and they're ministering to the patients we bring in. A lot of times we have between 10 and 15 patients in the hospital at any given time because we're very busy with these flights. And so you've got people you're ministering to every day, and the caregivers that come in, and then their family members if they happen to live in town. There's a lot of people from the river that have squatted in town as well, so you have some connections there. And so being able to minister to those people, sharing God's love, praying for them, bringing them food, clothes, and just sharing God's love with them and sharing the gospel message with them. And that's a huge part of what we do. And that has been that way since the very first patient we brought in.
Yeah, so you're using these airplanes and what they can do with regard to moving people from a remote part of the country to a hospital, and you're using that as a platform when you're able to share the gospel and the good news and the hope that we have because of Jesus Christ.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just telling a story about the other day, and just the Samaritan, the Good Samaritan story in the Bible. It's interesting. The guy that helped, it's two cultures that came together there. The guy that helped the other guy, he wasn't a doctor, but he had transportation to get the guy to a doctor. And that's really what kind of Samaritan aviation, really, We aren't doctors, although we do have medical staff now, a trauma nurse on staff full time, and another nurse that's on staff, but we get people to the hospital. We aren't doing the surgeries, we're not delivering babies, but we're getting people to where they can get the help that they need, and that's really what we do.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. That's something I should have asked about. How did the name Samaritan Aviation come to be the name of your organization? So thank you. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how you would say that the flying there on the mission field compares with the type of flying that you did and some of us are familiar with back here at home?
Yeah, it's hard actually to even give a reference, to be honest. I mean, we don't have weather out there. There's no weather reporting. So there's some satellite maps from Australia that you can look at to kind of get a general trend of where the rain is, or if it's an actual system versus an isolated. It's a tropical environment, so every afternoon you're going to have big thunderstorms and lightning and all of that stuff. That's just a given. And so, not having the weather, so you're basically sometimes, most of the time, you're launching without any information. Sometimes we get access to the village through HF radio or through a cell phone, and some of the villages have cell phones now. They've put towers in along the river. So sometimes you can get a weather update, but not always. And then you're also dealing with villagers trying to give you an aviation weather update.
Yeah.
And they've got someone dying, and so the weather's always good.
You're right.
So, so you're dealing with those challenges. So that's a big difference. Obviously, the people that come out that have flown in America, they fly. They kind of get their mind blown a little bit, to be honest. You just do what you need to do in a safe manner, and we're landing in these places that you're dodging fishing nets, and you've got canoes and crocodiles and trees that are 100 foot wide, tall, drifting down the river with roots sticking up 50 feet in the air, and then you're trying to dock along the side of a bank, and between two trees. There's no docks. It doesn't exist, and so there's so many things that you just would never even deal with on this side. So it's very hard to even compare. There's really very little comparison, to be honest. it's a completely different type of flying. It takes a completely different amount of skill and experience to survive over there. But getting from point A to point B, a lot of times it can have some similarities. But once you're dealing with, with the wheel guys, they're dealing with mountains and the weather and short strips and all of those things. And for us, we're dealing with the weather and some of the mountain stuff, not as much. But a lot of our work happens when we touch down on the river, trying to read the currents and figure out if the water's deep enough. You're looking at chocolate-colored water and trying to make a decision of whether that's water's deep enough to land the float plane, whether there's a sandbar under there, and just trying to learn through that experience. Definitely for me, I was pretty terrified the first year and a half I was there, because I knew it'd taken us so long to get there. I'm the one that's responsible for this airplane that all these donors and supporters and everybody back home is counting on me to make that decision. And when I'm operating in a place that hasn't had a float plane in 40 years, with people around saying it can't be done, and I tell you, there was a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
But God was faithful and helped me to make those right decisions. And so, yeah, it's a whole different way of flying.
All right. So it has wings and a propeller, and that's about where the similarities end.
Yeah, I mean, the stalls and the steep turns, all of those skills are the same. You learn all of that, but the decision part of it is
completely different skill set.
Yeah.
So you've told us that one great story about your first flight there, that memorable story with the mother and the child who's now named Mark. Do you have any other stories you would like to share that sort of stand out from the other days that you've flown, or something that you think particularly would communicate the type of work that you're doing there?
Yeah, I had there was another, mothers always seem to, it's a big deal to me. When my wife had our first child here in California, my daughter was in the ICU for a week, and my wife had a retained placenta, and my daughter is born, and there's immediately code blue, and all these people in masks come running in and resuscitate her and all that, right? And so whenever I see a mom in PNG, and I come up in the plane, and they're unconscious, and they're laying in a bottom of a dirty canoe.
Yeah.
That really hits home for me. And I remember another story, and picking up this lady, and unconscious once again. We're trying to get her in the airplane. There's not enough space for her husband. There's space for a caregiver. Usually we bring women in as caregivers because the men don't like to go in the maternity area, and the women are better at taking care of someone in the hospital typically than we are as men.
Right.
And in that culture especially, that's kind of a taboo area for the men to be in the maternity ward. So we bring in the ladies and their caregiver, and then the men usually will take the long way down, a couple days or whatever it takes to get into the hospital. And so I remember we picked up this one lady, completely unconscious. We rush her in. Once again, it's emergency surgery. She ends up 2 days later. The husband comes in, and we talked to him, and he said, in this culture, you always bury your dead back in the village. That's a cultural thing. So whether it's a miscarriage, or whether it's an older person, or whether it's a young person, you always have to get the body back to the village to be buried. And so he, the first place he goes is the morgue, because he's been told by all of his villagers that there's no way his wife's going to survive, and or his babies. And so he goes to the morgue to reclaim the body and work through that process. And there's nobody there. So, he starts walking around the hospital asking questions, find his way to the maternity recovery area, and walks in, and there's his wife sitting there holding twin babies. And, just talking to this guy, and it was just an amazing moment. He looked at us and he said, I'm not a good man. I'm a bad man. I don't deserve this, but God sent you guys here to save my wife and my babies. And tell you, that was a powerful moment for my wife and I to share Christ with this young family, and just to he realized that he did, none of us deserve what God's done for us.
Yeah.
And we're here because of His grace.
Yeah.
And anyway, that's an awesome story. Another story that is amazing is really cool. We had another call to him. These are all mothers and baby stories. I've got a lot of other stories too, but
That's fine.
These I could share more later. But we have this. We get this call out. This mother had twins in the village, and but there was still something going on, and they're trying to figure out what's going on. She's still not doing well, not recovering well. So the next day they call us in. Please help us. Very remote area. We get in there. There's actually a tribal war going on. So everybody has to stop. We kind of have to get permission to get this lady in and get her out. And we rush her in, and she goes onto the surgery table. Find out she's got triplets. So you've got a third baby, and she ends up dying on the operating table. And so now you have this baby in the family takes the body back to the village. This lady has 8 other children already back in the village. So her husband doesn't know what to do. And they asked one of our families, the Cook family, Sarah and Chris, who are our medical directors, to hey, can you look after this baby for a few weeks? And so anyway, taking a turn to a short story, 6 months later, they asked the Cook family to adopt this young girl.
Yeah.
And so her name's Charlotte. And anyway, so it took about 2 years, but now she's officially adopted into the Cook family. She lives on our base, and she's my little buddy. But this little girl is a reminder every time I see her of what we do and the lives that have been saved. And I could go on and on, from snake bites to guys that have been ran all the way through with spears and knives in the chest, arms removed, all of those things, and coming in and saving their lives.
Yeah.
Retained placentas over and over again, infections, poisonous snake bites where they literally have lost all control of themselves. And we're in the village administering anti-venom, and they come back. But it's all because of God's faithfulness and allowing us to be there, and all the supporters we have in America, our board, our advisory board, our mentors. I mean, all of this is a testament to their faithfulness. I have, and this is one of those things too. I just want to encourage people: don't get discouraged. When it takes a while. I have friends that literally supported our family for 10 years, faithfully every month before we ever got to New Guinea full time. And it blows my mind that those people believed in us enough. I don't know if they believed or not, but they believed that we believed, and they gave faithfully to allow us to do what we do today. And I always am amazed as I look back and just go, wow, how in the world, did you support us for 10 years before we were able to actually go over and do what we told you we felt God calling us to do?
Yeah.
But it's amazing. I mean, the staff is growing over there. We have 4 families now. We have 2 more pilots coming next month. And God continues to grow it. The impact we're having now is amazing. I mean, I was able to speak a couple weeks ago. I was in Papua New Guinea, and to speak at the National Health Symposium. And I get up there in the afternoon of the first day, and I look at the list of speakers, and I've got an honorable, which is the mayor of Port Moresby. I've got the right honorable, which is the prime minister who spoke before me. I've got a lord. Somebody with a lord, another guy's a knight, and all these doctors and professors, and then in front of my name it says Mr. And I got up there and I'm like, guys, I'm just a guy that God gave a dream to, and here I am. And anyway, just it's an amazing moment that sitting with the prime minister, having the Papua New Guinea government recognize what we do, fund 40% of what we do through grants, through foundations. It's just been amazing. It's just been one miracle after another, and I feel like we're just beginning. I'm so excited about the future and where God's leading us.
Yeah. Well, I really, really do appreciate all that, and just really good stories and understanding about the organization and so forth. You did an outstanding job explaining all that to our listeners. Why don't you, though? One thing I try to do on this show is make sure that we're not simply presenting a romantic version of things. You know, I want people to understand there are real struggles. There were struggles along the way. You are still struggling today, I'm sure, with operating this organization and being on one side of the world while family and friends and loved ones are on the other side of the world. So why don't you, if you don't mind, and you could even start with, you've talked about it a bit, but if there were particular struggles you had during your flight training that made things difficult and discouraging, and even today, what are some of the struggles you deal with? And they can be, the separation type of thing, the cultural things, or even spiritual struggles, if you don't mind going into those.
Yeah, I think that's, that we never like to talk about our struggles, but the reality is that, all the times that I've grown as a person or as a leader, and all the preparation that happened for me to be successful and my wife and family were through the struggles. But, those are faith-building times. I remember the early days when I was a youth pastor and worship pastor, and my wife's getting her master's degree in cross-cultural education, and I'm, trying to finish my instrument flying, and we literally have no money. And I remember going to my wife and saying, babe, we don't have any money. We can't even go to the store and buy a loaf of bread right now. And literally walk out to the mailbox, and there's a gift card to a grocery store that some anonymous person had just sent to us. Those are faith builders. I think those times over and over again when people would say, wow, you're still here? I thought you guys were in New Guinea 3 years ago. And there's just kind of the embarrassment really that those moments brought to it. Those are close people that that you respect, and so you kind of get some of that. We got some of that over the years. Being in New Guinea and being down to $2,000 in the checking account of a aviation organization. That doesn't last very long. When it costs about $1,000 and $800 to $1,000 an hour to operate. So you're those are just faith building times, really, but they're real. And I think one of the things I always joke about is God gave me the gift of stick-to-itiveness, just the ability to believe that it was His. I was so firm in the call and the belief of where He was leading us that I didn't question it. As hard as it wasn't easy at all. But, God was, I just saw Him, it didn't always go the way I wanted. We expected to be there in 5 years. It took 10 years, for example. But He always, as you look back, you could always see where His hand was there. And he just faithfully brought those areas of frustration, of challenge, and turn them into creating something in me that, or my wife or our family, that allowed us to then be successful when we went over there. I think even on the mission field, we were the new guys. Who are these guys over there trying to fly a float plane and do it for free? And there was some of that going on when we got to New Guinea, and trying to work with missionaries that had been there a long time, and really just not feeling adequate or prepared, but knowing God had called us, and we're just going to keep moving forward. And and then, but that all goes away, and just amazing respect for all those people that have been there and been there for so long, and been so faithful. But it just it's hard, and then you leave your family, and I just came back a couple months ago. I'm back and forth right now to New Guinea. My kids are doing a year of school here in the States, and I hadn't seen their grandparents in 2 years. And then this last week, my mom and dad came out, and those things where you kind of lose a whole chunk of time. My grandpa passed away while I was in New Guinea. I didn't get a chance to go to his funeral. Those things are hard. You miss weddings, you miss big events, and but that's the life that God has called us to. We have Papua New Guinea family now too, that are just like family members that we stay at our house and we stay in their village, and so you kind of you get some of that too. God allows you to have those relationships, and so as you look back, there's some things you're going to miss. There's some sacrifices you're going to make. It's a dangerous place. There's lots of sickness. There's lots of things that we deal with that you don't deal with here. But just knowing that where God wants you really is the safest place you could ever be. Anyway, that's kind of my wife always likes to remind us of that, and it's true. It doesn't mean it's the safest place, but it means it's where you're supposed to be, and that's really what matters. The rest is up to God anyway. So, yeah, I think I would encourage people to, as they're beginning. You can't wait till you've done 8 years and you're ready to go to the mission field. Now you're starting to look for donors. The reality is every one of your friends and people you've met in the last 8 years should know what God's called you to do and what you're doing, because once you finally get there, now you have a list of 100 people that are ready to support you, versus trying to all of a sudden decide you're going to go to the mission field, and now you're trying to build up a support base. You should be developing your team now. I started developing a team as a 19-year-old, and so by the time we were able to go over there was the people that was behind us, and so that's something I would really encourage people to think about and be intentional about as well. But that's a different topic. But yeah, I think once again, God's call keeps you pressing forward, His faithfulness, and as you can look back and see what He's helped you accomplish. And I think that you made a statement about how amazing it is what we did, but we didn't think it was very amazing. We were just doing what God called us to do. And looking back, it was like, wow, God, how in the world did we pull that off?
Yeah.
And we didn't. It was through God giving us that extra strength, those relationships, those pivotal people that came in to the organization just that right time, whether it was financially or advice or whatever, that allowed us to get to that next level. And I think that there's so many examples of that in Samaritan Aviation. I always tell people I'm the lucky one. I actually get to do it. I get to look those moms in the face, and those people that lives have been saved, and those people that have accepted Christ through what God has allowed me to be part of, and that to me is awesome.
Very good. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit? You mentioned earlier that your advice would be to find a mentor. So I'm curious if you had someone you would say was a mentor to you along the way, or even friends and family members who, and I'm talking about beyond financially here, but that supported you in unique ways along the way that sort of helped you press through the struggles that you were encountering.
Yeah, at a young age, I think I was around, I just gotten married. I was probably 23, 24, working as a youth pastor and a worship pastor. And I felt like, I don't know, I heard a sermon, I talked to someone, and they really encouraged me to get a mentor. And I did. I reached out, found that person. I started praying. Number one, I just started praying. God, who in my life, or is there someone I need to meet that can mentor me? And so I started meeting with this guy every couple of weeks, and he wasn't a pilot, but he was just someone I respected, his walk with Christ. I respected his life experience, and so it was great. It was a challenging time. He would challenge me in my marriage. He would challenge me in the goals and my personal walk with God, and I did that for several years. On the aviation side, we had an aviation advisor who had been a former MAF pilot in Colorado, Bill Rush. He was a great mentor, and then Bruce Johnson, who was an Alaskan float bush pilot for 40 years and helped start the Kodiak program. He became my mentor, and he actually came to, he trained me in America, and then he also trained me over in Papua New Guinea for the first couple months that we were there. We flew for about a month over there before he came home. But yeah, so those people are invaluable. I think so many times I think and it's a whole different subject, but I think the elderly or the older people get pushed out of the way, and the reality is they have all the answers. Because we all are way more smarter than we were 20 years ago, or at least I hope we are. And to imagine if 20 years from now we're going to have a lot more wisdom than we do now, and so many times we sideline the people that have all the answers. And so I think finding those people in our lives and I still do that try to surround yourself with people that are better than you, have more wisdom than you, and that can to help you get to that next level, because it's very difficult to do that on your own, and the amount of learning you have to do. There's no reason to make the same mistakes others have made when they can point them out to you before you make them. So that's a big one. I think also mentors give you the fact someone's been there, done that. Especially if you find a missionary pilot or someone who's been a successful aviator, they've been there, done that, and so I think that's a very important part of it.
Well, all right. Well, sort of bringing things to a close, I wonder if you do have any, because at this point you could serve a bit as a mentor to some folks. So I wonder if you have any final suggestions or advice or encouragement for prospective missionary pilots. Or let's pretend this. Let's say you could go back as a 40-something-year-old Mark and talk to 19-year-old Mark. What advice and encouragement would you give to him?
Yeah, I would tell him, it's worth it, number one. I think I probably wouldn't tell him too much, to be honest, because if I knew what I know now, as they say, who knows? But the amount of effort and years, I think, just being realistic. I'm a very goal setter. I have high expectations of myself and those around me. I think I would tell myself to realize it's a process, that God uses the process to make us, mold us into what we need to be when we get there. I think I wanted it right away. I wanted it, and God just kind of allowed me to plod along. So I think don't be discouraged. I know, when you look at an organization that's requiring this much, training, and they want you to have an AMP, and they have all these things, you can just give up right then.
Yeah.
So I think that's a huge challenge. But just know that it's that hard, You're not going to go out and be a weekend warrior in Papua New Guinea or Africa or Philippines or Mexico or whatever. That's just, you're not ready for it. And so I think as hard as it is, and all the requirements that we all organizations require, just know that those are there because there's been years and years of missionary bush flying, and we've all seen failures, and we've seen accidents, and we've seen other things that have caused us to have those requirements. So don't be discouraged, but also understand you got to count the cost, and it's going to take years to accomplish it, and you're not going to have a doctorate when you come out. You're not going to make a bunch of money, but you're going to have an impact on the world.
Okay, thank you. Well, I wonder if there is a book that you'd like to recommend to our readers, or maybe more than one book, and it can be something about missionary aviation, or something that helped you grow in your Christian walk, or even something that helped you in your flight training. Do you have anything you'd like to share?
For me, it was I had a book before I moved over to New Guinea. I had read a lot of different cultural books. I think it's important, especially if you know where you're going, to do your research on the culture. You're never going to learn You're going to learn most of it after you get there. That's the reality. But at least kind of have yourself ready, somewhat prepared for what you're working in. I was recommended to read this book called The Spirit of the Rainforest. And it was a real eye-opener for me as I looked at our role as missionaries in the culture, and of how it looks from the people's perspective. And the book is kind of from a witch doctor's perspective, actually, as he looked at the different white people that came into his village. One, whether it was missionaries or philanthropists, or not philanthropists, but it's escaping me, but people who study their cultures and all of that, how they see us as we come in with our Western ideas, and it's a real challenge to all missionaries, and for me, just to how you look at culture. What are you bringing to the culture that could be damaging? How do you see them in their culture? It's a very stark, real book that'll shock you a bit, but I think for me it was good. I needed that, and it really changed how I viewed my role in the culture was, and I think that's a big deal. How we see the people and the mindset that we come in with will really help you be effective in your ministry over there and in your relationships with the culture that you serve. And that book's written about, I believe it's the Amazon area. So it's South America, but it's very similar to Papua New Guinea. So for me, that was a very helpful book. And then I'm always reading. I'm reading leadership books. I'm just trying to figure out better ways to communicate God's message to the people, and to the people here in America who I'm trying to challenge and inspire to join us financially, or to join us in prayer, or to join somebody that's in their community doing something, or to go do something themselves. I think that's a big part of my passion, is to motivate others to do something, whether it's themselves or to help someone else get there that already has the call and the passion, and get behind people that are doing things, or go out and do something themselves.
So how could our audience be praying for you, Mark, and for your family, and for Samaritan Aviation in general?
Yeah, Samaritan, I'm back and forth this year. I've got kids in school, and so we've just working on leadership in New Guinea. 2 new pilots coming next month. We're raising money for a new airplane that we just bought, a 206, and we're refurbishing it right now. So we're raising funding for that. Just a lot of things I see changing in the next couple of years. I see us branching out to a different part of the country even, and I see God doing some really amazing things in the governmental support and partnerships that we're working on. So just prayer for that, and ultimately just pray, that we can stay faithful to the calling that God's given us to be the hands and feet of Jesus, and to show the people in Papua New Guinea that who Jesus is in a real, tangible, clear way. That's really the goal for everything we do, and just pray for safety for what we do, and just continued wisdom as we move forward.
Okay, I'll definitely be praying for those things, and I trust that folks who listen to the show will add those things to their prayers as well. How can people find out more about Samaritan Aviation? Say if someone's interested in becoming a financial supporter, or maybe even we have some individuals here who are training to be missionary pilots and are interested in what your process is. How can they learn more about Samaritan Aviation?
Yeah, you can learn more about Samaritan Aviation at samaviation.com. You can also go to our Facebook page, Samaritan Aviation, and start following us there. But the best thing financially, if you want to get involved and to see opportunities, just check us out at samaviation.com. And there's ways to donate online, or you'll see an address and all those things. Also, I'm happy to come speak. I'm here for the next few months back and forth, but I'll have some opportunities if you have a church that would like me to come share the story, or a men's group or whatever. Just get in touch with us at contact@Samaritan Aviation, and yeah, we'd love to come and share the story about what God's doing in Papua New Guinea and how He's molded our lives and given us this opportunity to share His love in a remote area.
Okay. And so how could people connect with you personally on social media? I know you've got an Instagram account, some other places. Would you like to share those with the audience?
Yeah, my Facebook, I mean, it's just Mark Palm is my Facebook account. Mark.palm is my Instagram account. So you can check that out. You can also, there's other stories. You can just Google Samaritan Aviation. There's some cool videos out there. There's media stories that might help you get a better grasp of what we're doing and what we've been up to the last several years.
All right. Well, Mark, I really enjoyed our time together today. You have certainly a fantastic story to share, and I'm glad we've been able to listen to it and share it with our listeners, and that includes the story of Samaritan Aviation as well. You are doing fantastic work, and I will be praying for God's continued blessings upon you and your family, and I hope that we can stay in touch, and always please let me know if there's anything that I could ever do for you, okay?
Hey, thanks, Jimmy. It's been an honor to speak with you today.
All right, buddy. Well, thank you so much.
Yep, God bless.
God bless.
Well, that's it for this episode. We thank you once again for listening. You can learn more about the podcast and subscribe to it by visiting plainfaith.com. That's PLANE faith.com. You will also find links there to connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you are interested in becoming a patron of the show, you can do that as well by visiting patreon.com/plainfaith. And of course, Jimmy would love to hear from you personally, so feel free to email him at jimmy@plainfaith.com or by using the contact form on our website. Until next time, remember that God made him to be sin who knew no sin, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God.
The intro and outro music for the Plain Faith podcast is a song called Chipper by Kevin MacLeod. You can find his work at incompetech.com.